The shrill ring of a phone at 2 in the morning cuts through silence like a blade. Victor Blackstone fumbles in the darkness of his downtown penthouse, his head pounding from too much scotch and too little sleep. The caller ID shows St. Mary's Hospital. Mr. Blackstone, this is Nurse Martinez from St. Mary's Emergency Department. Your wife collapsed at her office tonight. We need you here immediately. Victor sits up, suddenly alert. What, Bethany's at home sleeping? Sir, she was found unconscious in the Morrison Industries building. She's 8 months pregnant and experiencing severe complications. Please come now. The phone goes dead. Victor stares at the device, his mind racing. Bethany was supposed to be home hours ago. She'd been working late constantly, pushing herself despite her advanced pregnancy. He throws on clothes, the smell of another woman's perfume still clinging to his shirt from dinner with potential investors. 20 minutes later, Victor storms into St. Mary's Hospital, his expensive shoes clicking against the sterile floors. The emergency department buzzes with activity, but all Victor can think about is how this crisis will affect tomorrow's crucial board meeting. His tech startup, Blackstone Industries, is on the verge of a major breakthrough, and he cannot afford any distractions. Mr. Blackstone. A middle-aged doctor with kind eyes approaches. I'm Dr. Rachel Stevens, your wife's obstetrician. We need to talk. Where is she? What happened? Victor's voice carries more irritation than concern. Bethany experienced severe cramping and preeclampsia symptoms while working late. Her blood pressure spiked dangerously high. She's stable now, but we need to perform emergency surgery to prevent early labor complications. Victor runs his hands through his hair, still reeking of alcohol. Surgery tonight. Can't this wait until Monday? Do you know what this could cost us? Dr. Stevens steps back, taken aback by his response. Sir, your wife's life is at risk. The baby's life is at risk. Time is critical. How long will this take? I have the most important investor meeting of my life tomorrow morning. If word gets out that my family situation is unstable, it could destroy everything I've worked for. The doctor's expression hardens. Mr. Blackstone, your 8 months pregnant wife nearly died tonight. The surgery is not optional. Victor begins pacing the hallway, his phone already buzzing with messages. His startup's board members, his investors, his lawyers, everyone needs him focused and available. This medical emergency threatens to unravel years of careful planning and strategic maneuvering. Fine, but I need guarantees. How do I know this won't happen again? How do I know she won't keep disrupting my business with these episodes? Dr. Stevens stares at him in disbelief. Mr. Blackstone, pregnancy complications are not something your wife can control. She's been under tremendous stress, working 80-hour weeks despite medical advice to rest. She knows how important this year is for the company. We're about to go public. Everyone's counting on this success. As they argue in the hallway, Bethany lies in the pre-operative area, her face pale and drawn. She can hear Victor's voice through the thin walls, his anger and frustration echoing through the corridor. Even in her vulnerable state, she recognizes the familiar pattern. Everything revolves around Victor's needs. Victor's timeline, Victor's success. Amanda Walsh, Bethany's best friend and marketing director at Morrison Industries, arrives breathless from the parking garage. She rushes to Bethany's side, taking her cold hand. I got here as soon as I heard, your father's on his way too. Bethany's eyes fill with tears. Amanda, he's more worried about his meeting than whether the baby and I survive. Shh, don't think about that now. Focus on getting better. But Bethany can still hear Victor in the hallway, his voice rising as he argues with medical staff about timing and costs. The man she married 3 years ago, the charismatic entrepreneur who swept her off her feet, has transformed into someone she barely recognizes. Mrs. Blackstone, we need to prep you for surgery now, a nurse explains gently, beginning to wheel her gurney toward the operating room. Victor appears at her side, his face flushed with anger. Beth, you need to tell them to wait. 24 hours. That's all I need. The Hartwell Group is flying in from Tokyo specifically for this presentation. Bethany looks up at her husband, searching his face for any sign of genuine concern for her welfare. Instead, she sees only the calculating expression of a man whose primary worry is protecting his business interests. Victor, I'm scared, she whispers. You'll be fine. You always are. But this timing is absolutely terrible. Couldn't you have managed your stress better? Couldn't you have seen this coming? The words hit Bethany like physical blows. Even as she faces surgery to save her life and their unborn child, Victor focuses entirely on how her medical crisis inconveniences him. Dr. Stevens intervenes, her voice firm. Mr. Blackstone, I need you to step back. Your wife requires surgery immediately, and I need her to wait 12 hours. Surely you can give her something to stabilize her until after my meeting. The medical team exchanges shocked glances. Amanda grips Bethany's hand tighter, her own anger building at Victor's callous behavior. Sir, this is not negotiable, Dr. Stevens states firmly. Your wife could lose the baby if we don't operate now. Victor's response sends chills through everyone present. Then maybe that would solve some problems? The words hang in the air like poison. Bethany's eyes widen in shock and pain. Amanda gasps audibly. Even Victor seems surprised by his own statement, but he doesn't retract it. As the medical team wheels Bethany towards surgery, she realizes that her marriage has become something toxic and dangerous. The man she once loved views her pregnancy, their child, and her very life as obstacles to his ambition. In the operating room preparation area, Dr. Stevens documents Victor's disturbing responses in Bethany's medical file. His behavior raises serious red flags about the patient's home environment and emotional support system. Victor retreats to the hospital waiting area, still making business calls despite the early morning hour. He contacts his assistant, his board members, anyone who might help minimize the impact of this unwelcome disruption to his carefully planned schedule. Yes, it's a minor medical issue. She'll be fine by tomorrow afternoon. No need to reschedule anything. He lies smoothly into his phone, but deep in the operating room, Dr. Stevens works to save both Bethany and her unborn child from complications that could have been prevented with proper rest and stress management. Rest that Victor consistently discouraged in favor of maintaining his business interests. The surgery will take 3 hours. Victor spends that time strategizing how to spin this crisis to his advantage, never once considering that his wife might need emotional support, understanding, or compassion. When Amanda finally reaches Chairman Douglas Morrison at his estate, her voice shakes with urgency and disbelief. Mr. Morrison, it's about Bethany. She's in emergency surgery. And Victor is acting like her life doesn't matter at all. The chairman's response is immediate and cold. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Document everything Victor says and does. Everything. As dawn approaches, the battle lines are drawn. On one side stands Victor Blackstone, consumed by ambition and viewing his family as business assets. On the other side, the Morrison family begins to mobilize, recognizing that their daughter has married a man who poses a genuine threat to her welfare. The emergency surgery succeeds, but it marks the beginning of a war that will destroy Victor's empire and reveal the true cost of prioritizing profit over people. Dr. Stevens emerges from surgery at dawn, her scrubs still damp with perspiration. Victor paces the hospital corridor, his phone pressed to his ear, scheduling damage control meetings for later that morning. The surgery went well, Dr. Stevens announces. Both mother and baby are stable, but Bethany needs complete bed rest for the remainder of her pregnancy. Victor barely looks up from his phone call. How long before she can return to work? We have a major product launch in 6 weeks. Mr. Blackstone, your wife cannot work for the next month. Any stress could trigger premature labor or worse complications. Victor ends his call abruptly, his face darkening. Doctor, you don't understand. My wife is the marketing director for a major division of Morrison Industries. She can't just disappear for a month during our most critical period. Amanda stands beside Bethany's recovery bed, watching her friend sleep peacefully for the first time in weeks. The contrast between Victor's agitation and Bethany's peaceful state highlights the toxic dynamics that have been building in their marriage. Perhaps, Dr. Stevens suggests carefully, this is an opportunity for Mr. Blackstone to prioritize his family's health over business concerns. Victor's laugh is harsh and bitter. Easy to say when you don't have $50 million in investor funding dependent on perfect execution. Easy to say when you don't have 200 employees depending on this launch for their jobs. And easy to ignore when your wife nearly died last night, Amanda interjects, her voice sharp with disapproval. Victor turns on Amanda with sudden fury. This is family business. I don't need commentary from employees. I'm not just an employee. I'm Bethany's best friend, and I've watched you systematically destroy her health and happiness for the past 2 years. The argument escalates quickly. Victor's narcissistic abuse patterns emerge clearly as he deflects blame, minimizes Bethany's medical crisis, and centers himself as the victim of unfortunate timing. Beth knew what she was signing up for when she married an entrepreneur. She knew my business would require sacrifices from both of us. Now suddenly she's too delicate to fulfill her commitments. Dr. Stevens documents every word, recognizing the psychological abuse underlying Victor's statements. His language reveals a man who views his pregnant wife as a business asset rather than a human being deserving care and protection. Bethany stirs in her hospital bed, slowly regaining consciousness. The first sound she hears is Victor's angry voice berating Amanda for interfering in family matters. Victor, Bethany's voice is weak but hopeful. He immediately shifts his tone, moving to her bedside with practiced charm. Hey, sweetheart, you gave us quite a scare, but everything's fine now, and we can get back to normal. The baby, perfectly healthy, Dr. Stevens confirms, but you need to rest completely for the next month. Victor's jaw tightens, but he maintains his facade. Actually, doctor, I've been thinking, maybe Beth could work from home light duties only. Of course, she's brilliant at her job, and the team really depends on her insights. Bethany feels the familiar pressure building. Even recovering from emergency surgery, Victor expects her to prioritize his business needs over her own health and their child's welfare. I don't think I can. Victor, I feel so weak. You'll feel stronger once you're engaged with meaningful work. Lying around will just make you more tired. Dr. Stevens intervenes firmly. Mrs. Blackstone's body needs time to recover. Any work-related stress could trigger another crisis. Victor's mask slips slightly. With all due respect, Doctor, you're not running a multi-million-dollar company. Beth and I will figure out what works for our situation. Amanda watches this exchange with growing alarm. Victor's psychological manipulation techniques are textbook narcissistic abuse, love bombing, gaslighting, and emotional blackmail wrapped in reasonable-sounding language. Bethany doesn't need to figure out anything except how to rest and recover, Amanda states firmly. Victor's eyes flash with anger. Amanda, I think it's time for you to leave. Family decisions should be made by family members. Actually, I asked Amanda to stay, Bethany says quietly, finding strength in her friend's support. The power dynamic shifts subtly. For the first time in months, Bethany asserts a preference that contradicts Victor's wishes. His reaction is swift and telling. Beth, you're not thinking clearly. The surgery medications are affecting your judgment. Amanda's presence is just creating unnecessary drama. I want her here, Bethany repeats more firmly. Victor's facade crumbles entirely. Fine, but don't expect me to baby you through every minor medical issue. Some of us have real responsibilities. He storms from the room, leaving Bethany shocked by his callous dismissal of her near-death experience as a minor medical issue. Amanda moves closer to Bethany's bed. Honey, this isn't normal. The way he talks to you, the way he prioritizes his business over your life, this is abuse. Bethany's eyes fill with tears. But he's under so much pressure. The company launch is everything to him. And what are you to him? What is your baby to him? The question hangs in the air as Bethany confronts the painful truth. Victor's behavior during her medical crisis reveals his true priorities with crystalline clarity. In the hospital corridor, Victor paces frantically, making calls to reschedule meetings and manage the fallout from his absence. His primary concern remains protecting his business interests, not supporting his recovering wife. Tell the board that Beth had a minor procedure, nothing serious. We're still on track for the launch timeline, he instructs his assistant. But Dr. Stevens has already documented Victor's concerning statements about his wife's health being inconvenient to his business plans. Hospital social workers are reviewing the case for signs of domestic psychological abuse. When Chairman Douglas Morrison arrives at the hospital, his presence immediately changes the atmosphere. The 61-year-old business titan radiates authority and barely contained fury. Where is my daughter? He asks Amanda directly, bypassing Victor entirely. Room 307. She's awake and asking for you. Douglas studies Victor with cold calculation. I understand you've been making business calls in the emergency department while your 8 months pregnant wife underwent surgery. Sir, with respect, family crises require careful management to minimize damage to everyone involved, Victor responds, attempting to maintain his professional demeanor. Damage to everyone involved, Douglas repeats slowly. Interesting perspective. The chairman enters Bethany's room, his expression softening immediately as he sees his daughter's pale, exhausted face. Daddy, she whispers, tears flowing freely. I'm here, sweetheart. Everything's going to be all right. But outside in the corridor, Victor continues his calls, his voice rising as he argues with board members about maintaining the launch schedule, despite his wife's inconvenient timing. Dr. Stevens approaches the chairman privately. Mr. Morrison, I'm concerned about your daughter's home environment. Her husband's responses to this medical emergency raise serious red flags. Douglas Morrison's expression hardens. Document everything, doctor, every statement, every interaction. I have a feeling we're going to need detailed records very soon. The transformation begins here, in this hospital room, as the people who truly love Bethany start recognizing the narcissistic abuse she's endured and begin planning to protect her from the man she married. Victor remains oblivious, convinced his smooth talking and business success make him untouchable. He has no idea that Chairman Douglas Morrison is already making calls of his own, not to business partners, but to lawyers, investigators, and allies who specialize in protecting vulnerable family members from dangerous spouses. The battle for Bethany's future has begun, and Victor Blackstone is about to discover that some opponents fight with weapons he never imagined existed. 2 days later, Bethany prepares for discharge from St. Mary's Hospital. Dr. Stevens reviews her care instructions while Victor paces impatiently near the window, his phone buzzing constantly with business updates. Complete bed rest for 2 weeks minimum, Dr. Stevens emphasizes. No work, no stress, no lifting anything heavier than a coffee cup. We understand, Victor interrupts. Beth's very capable of managing her own recovery. Bethany sits on the hospital bed, still weak but grateful to be going home. The baby has been stable throughout her stay, but she remains anxious about potential complications. I've arranged for a home health aide, Amanda mentions, entering the room with discharge paperwork. Victor's head snaps up. That's unnecessary. I can handle Beth's care myself. You have 12-hour days scheduled all week, Amanda points out. The product launch meetings with the Hartwell Group, the investor presentations, the media interviews, those can be rescheduled if necessary. Victor lies smoothly. Bethany knows better. Victor has never rescheduled a business meeting for family reasons. His narcissistic abuse patterns include making promises he has no intention of keeping, designed to control her expectations and prevent her from seeking outside support. Actually, a health aide sounds helpful, Bethany says quietly. Victor's mask slips slightly. Beth, we don't need strangers in our home during this sensitive time. What if information about your condition reaches competitors? What if they use your health issues to question my focus and leadership? Even her recovery becomes about protecting his business interests. Bethany feels the familiar weight of being responsible for managing Victor's image and success. Dr. Stevens completes the discharge process, but her concerns about Bethany's home support system lead her to document additional recommendations for frequent follow-up appointments in emergency protocols. The drive home passes in tense silence. Victor grips the steering wheel tightly, his jaw clenched as he mentally calculates the cost of the past 3 days. Missed meetings, rescheduled presentations, and the perception of instability among his investors. Their downtown penthouse overlooks the city's financial district, a constant reminder of Victor's ambitions and achievements. The space is decorated like a corporate showroom rather than a family home, with expensive furniture chosen for impressive aesthetics rather than comfort. I'll help you to bed, Victor says, his tone suggesting this assistance is a significant burden. I can manage, Bethany replies, not wanting to increase his resentment. No, the doctor said you need help. I'll handle it. But his version of help includes constant commentary about inconvenience and disruption. As Bethany slowly climbs the stairs, Victor explains how her condition affects his schedule, his meetings, and his professional reputation. The board is asking questions, Some investors are concerned about leadership stability during family crises. I need you to understand how your health issues impact more than just you. The psychological abuse continues relentlessly. Victor positions himself as the victim of Bethany's medical needs, making her feel guilty for requiring care and support during a high-risk pregnancy. Once Bethany is settled in bed, Victor's phone rings immediately. He answers without hesitation, launching into an animated discussion about product specifications and market positioning. Yes, I'm fully available now. The medical situation is resolved, and we're back on track. Bethany lies in bed, listening to her husband describe her near-death experience as a minor disruption to potential business partners. The emotional isolation feels overwhelming. Amanda arrives that evening with groceries and homemade soup, finding Bethany alone while Victor attends an emergency board meeting. He left you by yourself on your first day home from the hospital. There was a crisis with the software development team. Victor had to manage it personally. Amanda sits on the bed's edge, studying her friend's defeated expression. Bethany, this isn't normal spousal behavior. When someone you love faces a medical emergency, you prioritize their recovery. But his company really is at a crucial stage. $50 million in funding, 200 employees, years of development work. It all depends on perfect execution over the next 6 weeks. And what about you? What about your baby? Before Bethany can respond, Victor returns home, his expression stormy. The board meeting apparently did not go well, and he's looking for someone to blame. Beth, I need you to call your father tomorrow. Some board members are questioning whether family medical issues will continue disrupting our timeline. What am I supposed to say? Tell him this was a one-time incident. Assure him that your health won't interfere with business operations again. The request reveals Victor's fundamental misunderstanding of pregnancy and medical care. He genuinely believes Bethany can promise to avoid future health complications, as if medical issues result from personal choices rather than physiological processes beyond her control. Victor, I can't guarantee that complications won't arise. I'm 8 months pregnant with a high-risk condition. His face darkens dangerously. Then maybe you should have thought about that before getting pregnant during the most important year of my career. The words hit like physical blows. Amanda gasps audibly at Victor's cruel statement. She didn't get pregnant alone, Amanda points out sharply. Victor turns on Amanda with sudden fury. This is a private conversation between my wife and me. I think it's time for you to leave. I'm not leaving Bethany alone while she's recovering. It's my house, and I'm telling you to get out. Bethany watches the confrontation with growing fear. Victor's narcissistic abuse patterns intensify under stress, and his business pressures are reaching dangerous levels. Amanda can stay in the guest room, Bethany says quietly. Victor's explosion is immediate and terrifying. No, I will not have employees questioning my ability to care for my own wife. I will not have gossip spreading through Morrison Industries about our personal business. He moves toward Amanda aggressively, his face flushed with rage. Get your things and leave. Now. Victor, please calm down, Bethany pleads. Calm down. My entire life's work is hanging in the balance. My wife is making demands I can't meet, and her friends are interfering in my marriage. How exactly should I be calm? The verbal abuse escalates rapidly. Victor begins shouting about sacrifice and commitment, about how Bethany's pregnancy threatens everything he's built. His words become increasingly cruel and personal. You always find a way to make everything about you every important moment in my career. You create some crisis that demands attention. That's not true, Bethany whispers. The investor dinner last month. You had morning sickness so severe I had to leave early. The board retreat. You were too tired to attend the spouse events. The product demo, you needed me to drive you to a doctor's appointment. Victor's narcissistic worldview becomes crystal clear. Bethany's pregnancy symptoms are deliberate sabotage of his success rather than natural biological processes requiring support and understanding. Amanda stands her ground despite Victor's intimidating behavior. Those were legitimate medical needs, not manipulation tactics. Medical needs that somehow always coincide with my most important professional moments. The argument reaches a breaking point when Victor accuses Bethany of weaponizing her pregnancy to control his schedule and damage his reputation with investors. You're doing this on purpose, he shouts. You can't stand that my business is succeeding, So you create medical emergencies to remind everyone that your needs come first? Bethany struggles to sit up in bed, her face pale with shock and hurt. How can you say that I almost died 3 days ago? Almost died from stress you created by working too hard against medical advice. Almost died from conditions you could have managed better if you'd been thinking about anyone besides yourself. The psychological abuse reaches stunning cruelty. Victor rewrites history to make Bethany responsible for her own medical crisis, eliminating his role in pressuring her to work excessive hours despite pregnancy complications. Amanda moves protectively closer to Bethany's bed. Victor, you're being completely unreasonable. Your wife needs support, not accusations. My wife needs to understand that marriages require sacrifice from both partners. My sacrifice is working 18-hour days to provide for our family. Her sacrifice should be managing her health without disrupting my ability to succeed. The narcissistic abuse reaches its peak as Victor positions himself as the long-suffering provider whose wife selfishly refuses to manage her pregnancy conveniently. He shows no recognition of the contradiction in his logic, demanding both that Bethany work excessive hours to support his business and that she manage her health perfectly to avoid inconveniencing his schedule. I want Amanda to stay tonight, Bethany says firmly. Victor's response crosses the line from psychological abuse into physical intimidation. He moves toward the bed aggressively, his hands clenched into fists. This is my house, my marriage, and my decision. Amanda leaves now, or I'll call security to escort her out. The threat hangs in the air as Bethany realizes her husband has become someone genuinely dangerous. His narcissistic abuse patterns have escalated to the point where he views her friend's presence as a threat to his control over the family. Amanda recognizes the dangerous dynamics and makes a quick decision. I'll go, but I'm calling you every hour to check on you. As Amanda gathers her things, Victor continues his verbal assault on Bethany, blaming her for creating drama and division in their marriage by choosing friends over her husband's legitimate needs. The evening ends with Bethany alone, frightened, and beginning to understand that her marriage has become a prison controlled by a man whose narcissistic abuse knows no boundaries. Outside in the hallway, Amanda makes 2 phone calls, one to Chairman Douglas Morrison and another to a domestic violence hotline, seeking advice on how to help a friend trapped in an emotionally abusive marriage with a powerful, manipulative husband. The crisis is escalating, and Victor Blackstone is about to discover that his actions have consequences he never anticipated. The next morning brings no relief for Bethany. Victor leaves for his office at dawn, but not before delivering a list of instructions designed to control her recovery process. I've canceled the home health aid, he announces while adjusting his tie. We can't afford to have strangers documenting our private business during this sensitive time. Bethany sits up carefully in bed, still weak from her recent surgery. But Dr. Stevens recommended professional care. Dr. Stevens doesn't understand the competitive business environment we operate in. Any sign of family instability could destroy investor confidence. The narcissistic abuse continues as Victor frames every aspect of Bethany's medical care through the lens of his business interests. Her recovery becomes another element requiring management to protect his professional reputation. I've also asked Amanda to limit her visits. Too much emotional support makes you dependent and weak. You need to focus on getting strong enough to return to work. Victor's psychological manipulation techniques reveal themselves clearly. He systematically isolates Bethany from support systems while positioning himself as the authority on her recovery needs. The launch timeline is non-negotiable. Beth, 6 weeks from today, Morrison Industries unveils the integrated marketing platform that will revolutionize customer engagement. Your division's performance will determine whether we secure the additional funding needed for national expansion. Even recovering from emergency surgery, Bethany faces pressure to prioritize Victor's business success over her own health. The emotional burden feels crushing. After Victor leaves, Bethany attempts to rest, but anxiety about disappointing him keeps her awake. She understands that her husband views her pregnancy complications as personal failures rather than medical conditions requiring care and support. Around 10 that morning, her phone rings. Amanda's voice carries unusual tension. Bethany, I need to ask you some difficult questions. Last night's argument with Victor, has this kind of behavior escalated recently? What do you mean on the name-calling, the accusations, the way he blamed you for your own medical emergency? These are red flags for emotional abuse. Bethany feels defensive despite recognizing truth in Amanda's observations. Victor's under tremendous pressure. The business launch represents everything he's worked toward for the past 5 years. And what about what you've worked toward your career, your health, your preparation for motherhood? The question forces Bethany to confront painful realities. Over the past 2 years, her own goals and needs have become secondary to supporting Victor's ambitions. The narcissistic abuse has been so gradual that she's barely noticed losing herself in the process. He doesn't mean to be cruel, Bethany explains. Success at this level requires sacrifices from both partners. Sacrifices, yes. Abuse, no. There's a difference between supporting your spouse's career and accepting treatment that damages your health and self-worth. Before Bethany can respond, her other line rings. Victor's name appears on the caller ID. Beth, I need you to call the Morrison Industries executives and reschedule today's marketing review meeting. Tell them you're feeling much better and eager to participate virtually. But Dr. Stevens said no work for 2 weeks. Dr. Stevens said no stress. There's a difference between stress and maintaining professional engagement. Besides, this meeting determines budget allocations for the next quarter. The pressure intensifies as Victor explains how her absence from one meeting could jeopardize months of strategic planning. His narcissistic worldview cannot accommodate the possibility that business operations might function without Bethany's constant availability. I don't feel strong enough for a strategy session, Bethany admits. You don't need to be strong. You just need to be present and supportive. The team needs to see that our family situation won't disrupt delivery timelines. Victor's language reveals his fundamental perspective. Bethany's medical crisis is a family situation requiring management rather than a health emergency requiring recovery time. What if complications arise during the meeting? What if I need to rest suddenly? Then you mute your phone and take a 5-minute break. Beth, successful people find solutions instead of creating excuses. The psychological manipulation continues as Victor positions reasonable medical limitations as character flaws. Bethany feels guilty for prioritizing her recovery over his business needs. After ending the call, Bethany lies in bed feeling trapped between competing demands. Her body needs rest, but her husband requires performance. The stress creates exactly the conditions Dr. Stevens warned could trigger additional complications. Amanda calls back 20 minutes later. How are you feeling about the meeting pressure? Confused, guilty, like I'm letting everyone down by being sick. Bethany, you nearly died 4 days ago. You're 8 months pregnant and recovering from emergency surgery. Feeling tired and weak is not a character flaw. The conversation helps Bethany recognize how Victor's narcissistic abuse has distorted her perception of reasonable expectations. She's internalized his belief that her medical needs are inconvenient obstacles to his success. What would happen if you simply said no to the meeting? Amanda asks. Victor would be furious. The team would question my commitment. The executives might lose confidence in our division's leadership. Or they might understand that pregnant women sometimes need medical care, and business operations can continue temporarily without your input. The radical concept that businesses can function without her constant availability challenges beliefs Victor has instilled through months of psychological pressure. That afternoon, Chairman Douglas Morrison makes an unexpected visit to the penthouse. His arrival immediately changes the atmosphere, bringing paternal protection and corporate authority. How are you feeling, sweetheart? He asks, settling into the chair beside Bethany's bed. Tired, worried about letting everyone down. Douglas studies his daughter's expression carefully. Who exactly are you letting down? Victor, the marketing team, the Morrison Industries executives who depend on our division's performance. And what about letting yourself down? What about letting your baby down by not prioritizing recovery? The question forces Bethany to examine her priorities from a different perspective. For months, she's measured success entirely through Victor's standards: business performance, investor satisfaction, professional reputation. Your mother and I built Morrison Industries over 30 years, Douglas continues. We've seen many product launches, many crises, many opportunities. None of them were worth risking family health and safety. But Victor's startup represents his entire future. Everything depends on perfect execution over the next 6 weeks. Douglas's expression hardens slightly. Bethany, successful businesses adapt to challenges. They don't demand that pregnant women sacrifice their health for launch timelines. The conversation continues as Douglas helps Bethany understand that Victor's inflexible demands reflect poor leadership rather than necessary business practices. Strong companies build systems that can accommodate temporary changes without collapse. I'd like to suggest something, Douglas says carefully. What if you took complete medical leave until after the baby arrives? Morrison Industries can reassign your responsibilities temporarily. The suggestion terrifies Bethany. Victor would never agree. He needs me available for strategic decisions and client communications. Victor's needs aren't the only consideration here. Your health matters. Your baby's safety matters. Your peace of mind during this pregnancy matters. Douglas's words reveal the fundamental flaw in Victor's approach. His narcissistic abuse creates false urgency around business needs while minimizing legitimate family priorities. That evening, when Victor returns home, Bethany attempts to discuss the possibility of extended medical leave. His reaction is swift and harsh. Absolutely not. We're 6 weeks away from the most important launch in company history. I need my marketing director focused and available, not hiding behind pregnancy excuses. It's not hiding. It's recovering from a serious medical emergency. An emergency that's been resolved. You're home, you're stable, and you're perfectly capable of participating in strategic planning from bed if necessary. Victor's narcissistic worldview cannot accommodate the possibility that recovery requires time and rest rather than immediate return to full productivity. He views Bethany's medical needs as conscious choices designed to manipulate his schedule. The meeting tomorrow is crucial. Beth, budget allocations, resource planning, market positioning, decisions that will determine whether we succeed or fail. The pressure intensifies as Victor explains how her absence could trigger a chain reaction of delays and setbacks. His arguments sound logical, but they're built on the false premise that business operations cannot function without her constant input. What if I compromise? What if I attend tomorrow's meeting, but then take the rest of the week to recover? Victor's satisfaction at this concession reveals his true priorities. He cares more about maintaining appearances of normal operations than ensuring his wife's complete recovery from a life-threatening medical emergency. As Bethany prepares for another night of stress and anxiety about disappointing various people with her medical needs, she begins to understand that her marriage has become a system designed to benefit Victor at her expense. The narcissistic abuse patterns are becoming clearer. Constant pressure, guilt manipulation, isolation from support systems, and positioning her reasonable needs as character flaws or business threats. But Chairman Douglas Morrison is also making preparations. His conversation with Bethany revealed the extent of Victor's psychological manipulation, and he's beginning to plan protective measures for his daughter and future grandchild. The battle for Bethany's welfare is intensifying, and Victor remains oblivious to the powerful forces aligning against his controlling behavior. At precisely 7 in the morning, Chairman Douglas Morrison's black sedan pulls up to Blackstone Industries' downtown headquarters. He doesn't call ahead or schedule an appointment. Some conversations require the element of surprise. Victor's assistant, startled by the unexpected arrival of one of the city's most powerful business leaders, immediately escorts Douglas to the executive floor. Victor emerges from his office, his smile confident but his eyes wary. "Mr. Morrison, what an unexpected pleasure. I hope Bethany's recovery is progressing well." Douglas studies Victor carefully, noting the practiced charm that conceals calculating ambition. "That's exactly what I came to discuss." They settle into Victor's corner office, surrounded by awards, newspaper clippings, and photographs documenting his rise from startup founder to industry leader. The space reflects Victor's narcissistic personality. Every surface celebrates his achievements. "I understand you've been pressuring my daughter to return to work despite medical advice for complete rest." Douglas begins without preamble. Victor's mask slips slightly. "Sir, I think there may be some misunderstanding. Beth and I are partners in building something revolutionary. She understands that success requires dedication from both of us. Partners don't manipulate their pregnant wives into attending business meetings 4 days after emergency surgery." The accusation hangs in the air as Victor recalibrates his approach. He can't afford to antagonize Chairman Morrison, whose influence extends throughout the business community. "Mr. Morrison, I have tremendous respect for your daughter's strength and capabilities. Perhaps she's portrayed our discussions as more pressured than intended. Douglas leans forward slightly. Are you suggesting my daughter is lying about your behavior? Not lying, just possibly misinterpreting business enthusiasm as personal pressure? You understand how dedicated professionals sometimes blur those lines. Victor's response reveals classic narcissistic abuse tactics, gaslighting designed to make Bethany doubt her own perceptions of his manipulative behavior. Let me share something interesting I discovered last night, Douglas continues. My legal team conducted a preliminary investigation into Blackstone Industries' financial structure. Victor's confident expression falters. I'm not sure what you mean. Through various shell companies and investment vehicles, Morrison Industries controls 43% of your startup's equity. The revelation hits Victor like a physical blow. He spent 3 years building his company, never realizing that his father-in-law has been his largest investor through carefully concealed ownership structures. That's impossible. I would know about an investment that large. Douglas slides a folder across the desk. Hartwell Capital, Pacific Ventures, Sterling Growth Partners, all Morrison Industries subsidiaries. We've been watching your business practices very closely. Victor opens the folder with trembling hands, discovering documentation of his own financial dependence on the Morrison family empire. His startup, his independence, his leverage, all illusions carefully maintained to preserve his ego. Why? Victor asked quietly. Because I wanted to understand the man my daughter married. I wanted to see how you operated under pressure, how you treated employees, how you managed investor relationships. Douglas's voice remains calm, but his eyes reflect cold fury. The results have been illuminating. Additional documents reveal evidence of Victor's questionable business practices, inflated revenue projections, misrepresented market research, and personal use of company funds for luxury expenses. Your company is built on deception. Victor, false promises to investors, manipulated data presentations, and financial irregularities that would interest regulatory authorities. Victor's world begins collapsing as he realizes the extent of his exposure. Mr. Morrison, I can explain these apparent discrepancies. I'm sure you can. You're very skilled at creating explanations that shift blame and minimize your responsibility. The words carry double meaning. Douglas has observed Victor's narcissistic abuse patterns with Bethany and recognizes identical techniques in his business operations. Here's what's going to happen. Douglas continues with deadly calm. You have 24 hours to transfer your company shares to my daughter. All of them. That's everything I've worked for. My entire life's achievement. Your entire life's achievement is built on my family's money and my daughter's contributions. Consider this a correction of ownership records. Victor's desperation becomes palpable. Sir, please reconsider. The business community would view this as a hostile takeover. My reputation would be destroyed. Your reputation should be destroyed. Men who abuse their pregnant wives don't deserve professional success. The accusation of abuse sends Victor into defensive mode. I've never laid a hand on Bethany. I've provided everything she could need or want. Abuse takes many forms. Victor, psychological manipulation, emotional isolation, financial control, constant criticism disguised as support, all documented in my daughter's medical files and witness statements. Douglas's legal team has been thorough, collecting evidence of Victor's narcissistic abuse patterns from multiple sources, hospital staff, family friends, business associates, and Morrison Industries employees who've observed the couple's interactions. You have a choice, Douglas states firmly. Transfer the shares voluntarily or face criminal investigation for fraud, public exposure of your abusive behavior, and complete financial destruction. Victor's mind races through possible escape routes, but Chairman Morrison has eliminated every avenue. The shell companies, the financial documentation, the witness statements, all carefully prepared to ensure Victor's compliance. And if I agree to your terms, you'll retain a modest settlement and the opportunity to rebuild your life without destroying my daughter's health and happiness. The offer contains both mercy and threat. Victor can accept limited consequences or face total annihilation. I need time to consider. You have until tomorrow morning. After that, the evidence goes to federal prosecutors and media outlets. Douglas rises to leave, but pauses at the office door. One more thing. Victor, If you attempt to pressure, manipulate, or punish my daughter for this conversation, the consequences will be immediate and severe. After the chairman's departure, Victor sits alone in his office, surrounded by the symbols of success that now mock his powerlessness. His startup empire, built through years of determination and sacrifice, hangs by threads controlled by the father of the woman he's systematically abused. His phone buzzes with a text from Bethany. "How was your morning? I'm feeling a little stronger today." The message breaks Victor's heart with its innocent concern. Despite his cruel treatment, Bethany still cares about his welfare and success. Her capacity for love highlights his own cruelty and selfishness. For the first time in months, Victor confronts the reality of his behavior toward his pregnant wife. The narcissistic abuse, the psychological manipulation, the prioritization of business over her health, all documented and exposed by investigators who've been watching his every move. By afternoon, Victor's lawyers confirm the devastating truth. Morrison Industries does indeed control his company through complex ownership structures. The financial irregularities are real and prosecutable. His business reputation depends entirely on Chairman Morrison's discretion. That evening, Victor returns home to find Bethany resting peacefully, her hand protectively covering her 8-month pregnancy. She looks up with a hopeful smile. "How was your day? You look stressed." Victor sits heavily in the bedroom chair, studying his wife's face. Her genuine concern for his welfare, despite his recent cruelty, forces him to confront the depths of his selfishness. "Beth, we need to talk about some business changes that might affect our future." "What kind of changes?" Victor struggles to find words that explain his situation without revealing the extent of his deception and abuse. How does he tell his pregnant wife that her father is destroying his empire to protect her from his own toxic behavior? "The company structure is more complicated than I realized. Your father has significant influence over our operations." Bethany's expression grows concerned. "Is that bad? It's complicated. It might mean some adjustments to my role and responsibilities." The conversation continues as Victor attempts to prepare Bethany for dramatic changes without admitting his own failures. His narcissistic personality prevents him from accepting full responsibility, even when facing complete defeat. But in Chairman Morrison's estate across town, preparations continue for the legal and financial warfare that will protect Bethany from her husband's manipulative control. The evidence is compiled, the legal strategies are prepared, and the network of powerful allies is activated. Victor Blackstone has built his empire on deception and abuse. Tomorrow, he'll discover that some foundations cannot support the weight of such corruption. The reckoning approaches, and there will be no escape from the consequences of treating a pregnant woman as a business asset rather than a beloved wife deserving protection and care. The next morning, Victor stares at legal documents that will determine his future. The papers spread across his desk represent complete surrender, transfer of all company shares, resignation from executive positions, and acknowledgement of Morrison Industries' majority ownership. His phone rings at exactly 9 o'clock. Nathan Pierce, Morrison Industries' head legal counsel, speaks with professional courtesy that cannot mask underlying steel. "Mr. Blackstone, I trust you've reviewed our proposal." "It's not a proposal, it's an ultimatum. Accurate assessment. Have you reached a decision?" Victor looks around his office one final time. The awards, the photographs, the symbols of achievement that defined his identity for 5 years. "What guarantees do I have that this ends the matter? Full compliance results in a quiet transition. Non-compliance results in public exposure and criminal prosecution. The choice remains yours." The conversation ends quickly. Victor signs the documents with shaking hands, officially transferring his life's work to the woman he systematically abused for months. Meanwhile, at the penthouse, Bethany receives an unexpected visit from Dr. Stevens, who arrives with concerning news from the hospital's social services department. "Mrs. Blackstone, I need to discuss some observations from your recent stay." Bethany settles carefully into the living room chair, her 8-month pregnancy making movement difficult. "Is something wrong with the baby?" "The baby is fine, but we've documented concerning patterns in your husband's behavior during your medical crisis." Dr. Stevens explains how hospital staff observed Victor's responses to Bethany's emergency surgery, his anger about timing, his prioritization of business meetings, his accusations about inconvenient medical needs. These behaviors suggest possible emotional abuse, which can be dangerous during pregnancy and postpartum recovery. Bethany feels defensive despite recognizing truth in the doctor's concerns. Victor's been under tremendous pressure with his company launch. He doesn't mean to be insensitive. Mrs. Blackstone, pregnancy-related stress that threatens maternal or fetal health is never acceptable, regardless of external pressures. The conversation continues as Dr. Stevens explains how emotional abuse during pregnancy correlates with postpartum depression, bonding difficulties, and long-term relationship problems. I'm required to document these concerns and recommend support resources. Would you be willing to speak with a counselor who specializes in helping women navigate difficult family dynamics? Before Bethany can respond, Victor returns home unexpectedly, his face ashen and his hands shaking. He stops short upon seeing Dr. Stevens in their living room. "Doctor, I wasn't expecting a house call. Mr. Blackstone, I was just explaining to your wife about support resources available during high-risk pregnancies." Victor's jaw tightens. "We have excellent private health care. Beth doesn't need additional support systems." The exchange reveals Victor's continued attempts to isolate Bethany from outside assistance, even as his own world collapses around him. Dr. Stevens maintains professional composure while documenting Victor's controlling responses to medical recommendations. Support systems benefit entire families, not just patients. After the doctor leaves, Victor struggles to explain his early return home without revealing the devastating meeting with Chairman Morrison. "There were some business developments that required immediate attention," he says vaguely. "What kind of developments?" Victor moves to the window, unable to meet his wife's eyes. "Partnership changes, restructuring decisions. Nothing that affects you directly. But everything affects Bethany directly. Victor's startup provided their income, their social status, their future security. The company's transfer to Morrison Industries will fundamentally alter their life circumstances." That afternoon, Amanda arrives with disturbing news from Morrison Industries headquarters. "Something major is happening with Victor's company. Legal teams, financial auditors, document transfers. Everyone's talking about significant ownership changes." Bethany feels growing anxiety about developments beyond her understanding. Victor mentioned partnership adjustments, but he seemed very upset about something. "Bethany, I think your father might be intervening to protect you from Victor's behavior." The suggestion terrifies Bethany more than comforts her. "I don't want my family destroying Victor's career because of misunderstandings about our marriage." "What if they're not misunderstandings? What if your father recognizes abuse patterns you've been conditioned to accept as normal?" Amanda's question forces Bethany to examine her marriage from an outside perspective. Has Victor's treatment genuinely been abusive, or has pregnancy stress simply magnified ordinary relationship tensions? "He's never hit me," Bethany says quietly. Physical violence isn't the only form of abuse. Emotional manipulation, financial control, isolation from support systems, constant criticism, these behaviors damage relationships and mental health. The conversation helps Bethany recognize patterns she's been minimizing. Victor's systematic dismantling of her confidence, his positioning of her needs as obstacles to his success, his punishment of her medical requirements. That evening, Nathan Pierce calls Bethany directly, requesting a private meeting to discuss legal protections available during her pregnancy and recovery period. "Mrs. Blackstone, recent developments may create opportunities to ensure your safety and security during this vulnerable time." "What kind of developments?" "Changes in your husband's business situation that affect family finances and decision-making authority?" Bethany agrees to the meeting, despite knowing Victor would oppose outside legal consultation. Her growing recognition of his controlling behavior makes independent advice seem increasingly necessary. When Victor returns that evening, his demeanor has changed dramatically. Gone is the confident entrepreneur. In his place sits a defeated man facing the destruction of his carefully constructed empire. "Beth, we need to discuss some significant changes in our circumstances." "What happened today?" Victor struggles with explanations that acknowledge his failures without admitting abuse or deception. "Your father's business interests have become more involved with my company than I previously understood." "Involved how?" "He's been a major investor through various channels. His influence over company operations is more extensive than I realized. Victor's version of events minimizes his own financial improprieties and psychological abuse, presenting the situation as a business disagreement rather than consequences for harmful behavior. What does this mean for us? It means some adjustments to my role and our financial situation. Nothing that threatens our security, but changes nonetheless. The conversation continues as Victor attempts to prepare Bethany for dramatic life alterations without accepting responsibility for creating the crisis through his narcissistic abuse and business deceptions. But across town, Chairman Morrison finalizes legal strategies designed to protect his daughter from a husband whose controlling behavior threatens her health and their unborn grandchild's welfare. The legal warfare has begun in earnest, with powerful attorneys, financial investigators, and family court specialists coordinating comprehensive protection for a pregnant woman whose husband views her as a business asset rather than a beloved wife deserving care and respect. Victor's empire crumbles around him, while Bethany begins understanding that her marriage has become a system designed to benefit him at her expense. The reckoning approaches, and there will be no escape from consequences of treating pregnancy as inconvenience rather than miracle requiring protection and celebration. Judge Patricia Donnelly's courtroom fills with attorneys, investigators, and media representatives as the emergency hearing begins. Victor sits beside his legal team, his confident facade cracking under the weight of evidence arrayed against him. Chairman Douglas Morrison occupies the front row, his presence lending gravity to proceedings that will determine his daughter's future safety. Nathan Pierce approaches the bench with boxes of documentation spanning 3 years of Victor's business practices and personal behavior. Your Honor, we present evidence of systematic financial fraud, emotional abuse, and endangerment of a pregnant woman's health and safety. Judge Donnelly, known for her no-nonsense approach to domestic relations cases, reviews the preliminary filings with growing concern. The documentation spans hospital records, business communications, witness statements, and financial audits. Mr. Blackstone, these are serious allegations. How do you respond to charges that you physically intimidated your 8 months pregnant wife during a medical emergency? Victor's attorney stands quickly. Your Honor, my client maintains that stress-related disagreements have been mischaracterized as abuse. Mr. Blackstone is a devoted husband facing unprecedented business pressures. Devoted husbands don't prioritize investor meetings over their wives' emergency surgery, Judge Donnelly observes dryly. Nathan Pierce presents the first piece of evidence, hospital security footage showing Victor's aggressive behavior toward medical staff and his shocking physical contact with Bethany in the preoperative area. The courtroom falls silent as the footage plays. Victor's face flushes with shame as his own actions reveal the depths of his callousness during Bethany's medical crisis. Mr. Blackstone, I'm watching you grab your pregnant wife's shoulders and shake her while she prepares for emergency surgery. How do you explain this behavior? Victor's attorney objects to the characterization, but the evidence speaks for itself. Multiple hospital staff members documented Victor's concerning statements about his wife's medical needs being inconvenient to his business schedule. Furthermore, Your Honor, Nathan continues, we present evidence of systematic financial fraud designed to conceal Mr. Blackstone's dependence on Morrison Industries funding. The financial documentation reveals Victor's deceptive practices, inflated revenue reports, misrepresented market research, and personal use of company funds for luxury expenses. Dr. Stevens testifies about Victor's responses during Bethany's hospitalization, describing his anger about surgery timing and his accusations that her medical crisis was deliberately timed to sabotage his business meetings. In 30 years of obstetric practice, I've never encountered a husband who viewed his wife's life-threatening pregnancy complications as personal inconvenience rather than medical emergency. Amanda Walsh takes the stand to describe Victor's escalating psychological abuse, his isolation of Bethany from support systems, his constant criticism disguised as motivation, his positioning of her reasonable needs as character flaws. Victor systematically destroyed Bethany's confidence and independence. She began questioning her own judgment about basic needs like medical care and emotional support. The testimony reveals classic narcissistic abuse patterns, gaslighting, manipulation, and control tactics designed to maintain dominance over a vulnerable partner. Victor's business associates testify about his concerning statements regarding family obligations. Multiple witnesses describe his complaints about pregnancy interfering with business operations and his suggestions that family medical issues reflected poor personal management. Mr. Blackstone frequently stated that successful entrepreneurs couldn't afford to be distracted by domestic crises, testifies his former business partner. He seemed to view his wife's pregnancy as a business liability rather than a family blessing. The evidence accumulates relentlessly. Financial records, witness statements, medical documentation, and recorded communications paint a comprehensive picture of a man whose narcissistic personality created dangerous conditions for his pregnant wife. Judge Donnelly reviews Morrison Industries' documentation of their substantial investment in Victor's company, revealing his complete financial dependence on the family he's been abusing. Mr. Blackstone, you've built your business empire using funds from your wife's family while simultaneously treating her pregnancy as an obstacle to your success? Do you see the contradiction in this behavior? Victor's attorney attempts damage control, arguing that business stress affected his client's judgment during a challenging period. But the evidence spans months of systematic abuse, not isolated incidents during crisis. Nathan Pierce presents psychological evaluations confirming that Victor's behavior patterns align with narcissistic personality disorder, creating dangerous dynamics for family relationships and child welfare. Your Honor, Mr. Blackstone's documented responses to his wife's medical emergency reveal a man who prioritizes personal ambition over family safety. This poses ongoing risks to both mother and child. The courtroom testimony continues as additional witnesses describe Victor's controlling behavior, his financial deceptions, and his systematic isolation of Bethany from support systems. Morrison Industries employees testify about observing Victor's psychological pressure on Bethany to work excessive hours despite pregnancy complications, his criticism of her medical appointments as inconvenient, and his anger when she required rest or support. He made it clear that Bethany's pregnancy was acceptable only if it didn't interfere with business operations, explains one colleague. She was expected to manage her health invisibly while maintaining full professional responsibilities. As evidence mounts, Victor's defense crumbles. His attorneys realize their client faces not only loss of business assets, but potential criminal charges for endangering a pregnant woman and fraudulent business practices. Judge Donnelly calls a brief recess, during which Victor's legal team delivers harsh reality about his situation. The evidence is overwhelming, his lead attorney explains quietly. Financial fraud, emotional abuse, endangerment of pregnancy. You're facing criminal prosecution unless you accept the settlement immediately. Victor looks across the courtroom at Chairman Morrison, whose cold stare reflects paternal fury at a son-in-law who threatened his daughter's safety. There will be no mercy, no negotiation, no escape from consequences. When court resumes, Judge Donnelly delivers her decision with authority that brooks no appeal. Mr. Blackstone, the evidence presented demonstrates systematic abuse of a pregnant woman, financial fraud, and behavior that endangers both maternal and fetal welfare. She orders immediate asset transfer, supervised visitation rights pending psychological evaluation, and mandatory counseling for narcissistic personality disorder. This court cannot allow continued contact between Mr. Blackstone and his wife, given documented patterns of psychological abuse and control. Victor's empire collapses in real time as journalists document his public humiliation. The successful entrepreneur becomes a cautionary tale about how narcissistic abuse destroys both families and businesses. As the courtroom empties, Victor sits alone at the defendant's table, surrounded by the wreckage of his self-created destruction, his startup, his reputation, his marriage, his future, all sacrificed to maintain control over a woman whose only crime was loving someone incapable of returning that love healthily. Chairman Morrison approaches Nathan Pierce with satisfaction, tempered by sadness that such drastic measures were necessary to protect his daughter. Is Bethany safe now? She's safe, sir, and she's free to build whatever life she chooses without fear of manipulation or control. The legal warfare ends with complete victory for those protecting a pregnant woman from her abusive husband, but the personal cost will require time and healing to fully address. 3 weeks after the courtroom devastation, Bethany sits in her childhood bedroom at the Morrison estate, preparing for the birth of her daughter, The familiar surroundings provide comfort and security that had vanished during her marriage to Victor. Dr. Stevens monitors her carefully, noting significant improvements in blood pressure and stress levels since the separation. How are you feeling about single motherhood? Terrified? Grateful? Free? Bethany touches her belly gently. It's strange how losing everything can feel like gaining everything. The transformation began immediately after Victor's legal defeat. Without his constant criticism and control, Bethany rediscovered confidence that had been systematically eroded through months of psychological abuse. Amanda visits daily, marveling at her friend's recovery from the narcissistic abuse that had nearly destroyed her spirit. "You look like yourself again. I hadn't realized how much you changed until I saw you returning." The observation highlights the insidious nature of emotional abuse. Change is so gradual that even close friends don't recognize the victim's personality disappearing under layers of manipulation and control. Chairman Morrison enters with updates about Victor's situation. The legal proceedings continue as prosecutors build cases for both domestic abuse and financial fraud. He's lost everything: the company, the penthouse, his professional reputation. Several former business partners are pursuing civil suits for misrepresented investments. Bethany feels complex emotions about her ex-husband's downfall. Despite his cruel treatment, she remembers the charming man she married and grieves for the person she thought he could become. What happens next? He faces criminal charges for financial fraud and a separate trial for domestic abuse. His attorneys are recommending plea agreements for both cases. The legal process will continue for months, but Bethany's immediate safety is secured through restraining orders and supervised visitation arrangements that protect both mother and child from further manipulation. Dr. Stevens explains how stress reduction dramatically improves pregnancy outcomes. Your blood pressure has stabilized, the baby's growth is excellent, and all complications from your emergency surgery have resolved completely. The medical improvements underscore how Victor's behavior created genuine health risks during a vulnerable pregnancy. His narcissistic abuse contributed directly to conditions that could have been fatal for both mother and child. "I want to understand why I accepted his treatment for so long," Bethany tells the family counselor her father arranged. "How did I lose myself so completely?" The therapy sessions reveal classic patterns of narcissistic abuse: love bombing, gradual isolation, gaslighting, and systematic destruction of self-worth designed to maintain control over an intimate partner. Abusers target successful, confident people because the challenge appeals to their need for dominance, the counselor explains. They systematically dismantle their victims' support systems and self-perception. Understanding the psychology helps Bethany forgive herself for staying in a destructive marriage. The abuse was professionally executed manipulation, not personal weakness or poor judgment on her part. Meanwhile, Victor's world continues collapsing. Media coverage of his legal troubles destroys his professional reputation, while former friends and colleagues distance themselves from the scandal. His new apartment reflects his dramatic change in circumstances. A modest space in a middle-class neighborhood, furnished with basic items from discount stores. The luxury lifestyle supported by Morrison Industries funding has vanished completely. Mr. Blackstone, the plea agreement requires admission of guilt for both financial fraud and domestic abuse charges. His attorney explains during a meeting in the tiny apartment: 5 years probation, community service, mandatory counseling, and supervised visitation with your daughter. Victor stares out the window at the city skyline, where his former penthouse once overlooked his startup headquarters. Both buildings now house other people living other dreams. What about rebuilding, starting over? Your business reputation is destroyed. The criminal charges will follow you permanently. Employment options are limited to positions that don't require financial responsibility or public trust. The reality settles over Victor like cement. His narcissistic abuse of Bethany triggered consequences that extend far beyond their marriage, destroying every aspect of the life he spent years building. Back at the Morrison estate, Bethany begins planning her daughter's future with resources and support Victor's controlling behavior had made impossible to access. "I want to establish a foundation for domestic abuse survivors," she tells her father, "using the proceeds from Victor's former company to help other women escape similar situations." Chairman Morrison smiles proudly at his daughter's strength and compassion. The board of directors will approve that initiative immediately. It's an appropriate use of funds recovered from someone who caused such harm. The foundation becomes Bethany's new mission, transforming her painful experience into resources for other women facing narcissistic abuse and control from intimate partners. Dr. Stevens brings encouraging news about the pregnancy. All signs indicate a healthy delivery. The stress reduction has eliminated virtually all risk factors from your earlier complications. Bethany feels profound relief that her daughter will be born into an environment of love and support rather than tension and psychological manipulation. I used to worry that Victor's stress would somehow affect the baby's development. Now I realize my stress about his stress was the real danger. The insight reflects Bethany's growing understanding of how narcissistic abuse creates cycles of anxiety and self-doubt that damage both relationships and health. As her due date approaches, Bethany feels stronger and more confident than she has in years. The woman who nearly died from pregnancy complications caused by psychological stress has transformed into a powerful advocate for maternal and family welfare. Victor's plea hearings proceed quietly, attracting little media attention. The man who once commanded headlines for his business success now faces consequences for his failures as a husband and father. He signs the agreements mechanically, accepting responsibility for behavior that destroyed his marriage, endangered his wife's health, and created criminal liability. The court requires acknowledgement that your actions constituted domestic abuse. The prosecutor states clearly, "Do you understand and accept this designation?" Victor nods silently, the word abuser now part of his permanent legal record. His narcissistic personality struggles with accepting responsibility, but the evidence allows no alternative interpretation. The reckoning is complete. A powerful businessman reduced to minimum wage employment and supervised access to his daughter, while his former victim builds new life dedicated to protecting other women from similar harm. Bethany's journey from abuse survivor to advocate demonstrates that strength often emerges from surviving situations that initially seem impossible to overcome. Her daughter will be born free from the toxic dynamics that characterized her parents' marriage, growing up instead in an environment that celebrates her mother's courage and resilience in choosing safety over status, truth over manipulation, and love over control. 6 months after her daughter Emma's birth, Bethany stands before the Morrison Industries Board of Directors, presenting her transformation of Victor's failed startup into the Maternal Wellness Initiative, a profitable subsidiary focused on supporting working mothers and pregnant women. The market research reveals significant gaps in corporate support for maternal health and family wellness, Bethany explains confidently, her presentation skills sharper than ever. Our integrated platform addresses these needs while generating sustainable revenue streams. Board members nod approvingly as Bethany outlines strategic plans that combine social impact with sound business practices. Her vision extends far beyond Victor's narrow focus on profit maximization, incorporating employee welfare and community support into the corporate mission. Chairman Morrison watches his daughter with pride, recognizing leadership abilities that narcissistic abuse had suppressed but never destroyed. Bethany's recovery reveals strength that her marriage had hidden under layers of manipulation and control. The foundation has already assisted over 200 women in escaping abusive relationships. Bethany continues, "We're documenting measurable improvements in maternal health outcomes when women receive appropriate psychological and financial support during pregnancy." Amanda, now serving as Bethany's Chief Operating Officer, presents financial data showing impressive growth across all business divisions. Their partnership flourishes without the toxic interference that characterized Victor's management style. Quarterly revenues exceed projections by 30%, with employee satisfaction scores at company-wide highs. Amanda reports, "The corporate culture prioritizes family welfare alongside professional achievement. The business success validates Bethany's leadership philosophy. Supporting employees' personal needs enhances rather than undermines professional productivity." Victor's zero-sum approach, viewing family obligations as obstacles to business success, had been fundamentally flawed. After the board meeting, Bethany returns to her office overlooking the city's business district. The space reflects her values: comfortable furniture for nursing mothers, family photographs, and mission statements emphasizing both profit and purpose. Her assistant brings Emma from the on-site childcare facility, a benefit Bethany implemented to support all working parents in the company. The baby girl, now 6 months old, babbles happily as her mother balances conference calls with feeding schedules. "How's our little CEO in training?" Amanda asks, tickling Emma's feet while discussing marketing strategies for the maternal wellness platform. She's learning early that women can be both successful mothers and effective leaders, Bethany replies. Her confidence a stark contrast to the uncertain woman who once questioned her own judgment about basic medical needs. The transformation extends beyond professional success. Bethany's personal life reflects healthy boundaries and supportive relationships that Victor's controlling behavior had systematically destroyed. Dr. Stevens visits regularly, monitoring both Emma's development and Bethany's continued recovery from the psychological trauma of narcissistic abuse. Your stress levels remain stable, blood pressure is excellent, and bonding with Emma appears completely natural. The doctor observes during a routine checkup. The contrast with your condition during pregnancy is remarkable. Bethany nurses her daughter while reviewing foundation applications from women seeking assistance to escape abusive relationships. Each story resonates with her own experience of gradual isolation and psychological manipulation. I want to expand our legal assistance program, she tells Nathan Pierce during their monthly foundation meetings. Too many women can't afford the kind of comprehensive legal support that protected me. Nathan nods approvingly. We're already seeing increased demand. Word spreads quickly in communities where domestic abuse survivors need resources and advocacy. The foundation's growth reflects both need and effectiveness. Bethany's personal experience with narcissistic abuse provides authenticity that resonates with women facing similar challenges. Meanwhile, Victor's circumstances continue their downward trajectory. His minimum wage job at a warehouse loading dock provides barely enough income for basic living expenses and child support payments. His supervised visits with Emma occur under court-mandated observation, with social workers documenting his interactions and assessing his fitness for increased parental responsibility. Mr. Blackstone, your daughter doesn't recognize you as a primary caregiver, the social worker notes during a particularly awkward visit. Building meaningful relationships requires consistent, positive engagement over time. Victor struggles with basic childcare tasks, his narcissistic personality ill-equipped for the selfless devotion that healthy parenting requires. Emma cries during most visits, sensing tension and unfamiliarity in his interactions. His mandatory counseling sessions address the personality disorders that created abusive relationship patterns. But progress is slow and uncertain. Narcissistic personality disorder requires extensive therapy to modify deeply ingrained thought patterns, his court-appointed psychologist explains. Many patients resist treatment because they view their behavior as justified rather than harmful. Victor's resistance to accepting responsibility continues undermining his recovery. He maintains that business pressures excused his treatment of Bethany, refusing to acknowledge that pregnant wives deserve support regardless of external circumstances. Back at Morrison Industries, Bethany's success creates new opportunities for expansion and innovation. Her leadership style, collaborative rather than controlling, supportive rather than manipulative, generates both loyalty and results. We're receiving inquiries from companies nationwide wanting to implement our maternal wellness programs, Amanda reports during their weekly strategy meeting. The market demand exceeds our current capacity. Bethany considers expansion possibilities while bouncing Emma on her lap. Growth is good, but not at the expense of our core mission. Every decision must prioritize family welfare alongside business success. The philosophy represents a complete rejection of Victor's approach, which had sacrificed family needs for corporate ambition. Bethany's model proves that supporting employees' personal lives enhances rather than undermines professional achievement. Her romantic life remains focused on healing and personal growth. Several men express interest in dating a successful single mother, but Bethany prioritizes Emma's needs and her own psychological recovery. I'm learning to trust my instincts again, she tells her therapist. Victor's manipulation made me question my judgment about everything, including people's motives and character. The therapy continues addressing residual effects of narcissistic abuse, self-doubt, hypervigilance, and difficulty accepting that her needs matter as much as others' demands. Healthy relationships require mutual respect and support, the therapist emphasizes. Anyone who pressures you to sacrifice Emma's or your own welfare for their convenience displays red flags similar to Victor's behavior. Bethany's recovery includes developing firm boundaries about acceptable treatment from romantic partners, professional colleagues, and family members. Never again will she accept manipulation disguised as love or criticism presented as motivation. As Emma approaches her first birthday, Bethany reflects on the year's transformations. The terrified pregnant woman who nearly died from stress-related complications has become a confident leader, building businesses that prioritize family welfare. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you becomes the catalyst for the best thing that could happen, she tells Amanda while watching Emma play in the office nursery. The observation captures Bethany's journey from victim to survivor to advocate. Her marriage to Victor, despite its psychological damage, ultimately led to personal growth, professional success, and mission-driven work that helps other women escape similar abuse. The foundation continues expanding its services, legal assistance, psychological counseling, financial support, and advocacy for legislative changes that protect pregnant women from domestic abuse. We're creating the support systems I wish had existed during my marriage, Bethany explains to a group of donors funding the foundation's growth. Every woman deserves access to resources that can save her life and her children's future. Her story resonates with audiences nationwide, inspiring both financial contributions and volunteer participation from people who recognize the importance of protecting vulnerable families from narcissistic abuse and control. 1 year after Emma's birth, Bethany receives the Businesswoman of the Year award at the city's annual leadership conference. She stands at the podium, her daughter sleeping peacefully in Amanda's arms in the front row, as hundreds of business leaders applaud her transformation of personal trauma into professional triumph. When I accepted this award, I thought about the woman I was 2 years ago, successful by conventional measures, but slowly losing herself in a relationship that prioritized business achievement over human dignity. Bethany begins, her voice strong and clear. The audience listens intently as she describes her journey from abuse survivor to advocate, from victim to victor, from someone who questioned her own judgment to a leader who trusts her instincts completely. Domestic abuse survivors often struggle with shame about staying in destructive relationships. I want to address that shame directly. Abusers are professionals at manipulation. Leaving requires resources, support, and recognition that abuse is never the victim's fault. The speech highlights Bethany's mission to educate business leaders about supporting employees who face domestic violence, recognizing that workplace policies can provide lifelines for trapped women seeking escape routes from narcissistic abuse. The Maternal Wellness Initiative has demonstrated that supporting employees' personal welfare enhances rather than undermines professional productivity. Companies that prioritize family health see measurable improvements in retention, performance, and innovation. From the back of the auditorium, a solitary figure watches through the glass doors. Victor Blackstone, wearing his warehouse uniform during his lunch break, observes the woman who was once his wife accepting accolades for work built on the foundation of his former company. His own transformation over the past 2 years has been profound and humbling. The confident entrepreneur who once commanded boardrooms now struggles with basic interpersonal skills and financial management. Court-mandated therapy has forced him to confront the narcissistic personality traits that destroyed his marriage and endangered his family. Mr. Blackstone, his counselor had explained during a recent session, recovery requires genuine acknowledgement of harm caused, not just compliance with legal requirements. The distinction between genuine remorse and strategic manipulation continues challenging Victor's deeply ingrained thought patterns. His narcissistic tendencies resist accepting that his behavior was fundamentally wrong rather than merely poorly timed. Back at the podium, Bethany concludes her acceptance speech with words that carry special meaning for domestic abuse survivors in the audience. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you becomes the foundation for the best thing that ever happened to you. My daughter will grow up knowing that women can be both loving mothers and powerful leaders, that success includes protecting the vulnerable, and that strength often emerges from surviving situations that initially seem impossible to overcome. The standing ovation reflects both admiration for Bethany's achievements and recognition of the courage required to transform personal trauma into public advocacy. After the ceremony, Bethany mingles with fellow business leaders who express interest in implementing similar programs at their companies. The ripple effects of her work extend far beyond Morrison Industries, creating industry-wide changes in how corporations address employee welfare and family support. Your foundation helped my sister escape an abusive marriage last month, confides a technology executive. The legal assistance and temporary housing programs gave her options she didn't know existed. Stories like this fuel Bethany's continued commitment to expanding resources for domestic abuse survivors. Each successful escape validates the importance of comprehensive support systems that address legal, financial, psychological, and practical needs. Chairman Morrison approaches with obvious pride in his daughter's accomplishments. Your mother would be so proud of what you've built from such difficult circumstances. Grace Morrison had passed away 6 months earlier, but not before seeing her daughter transform from a frightened abuse victim into a confident advocate for family welfare and women's rights. She taught me that strength isn't avoiding difficulty. It's what you choose to build after you've been knocked down. Bethany reflects, echoing her mother's wisdom about resilience and recovery. Emma, now walking and babbling constantly, represents the future Bethany has secured through her courage to leave an abusive marriage. The little girl will grow up understanding that love means support and protection, not control and manipulation. Dr. Stevens, now serving on the Foundation's Medical Advisory Board, continues monitoring both Emma's development and Bethany's ongoing recovery from psychological trauma. You've created something remarkable here, she observes during a Foundation board meeting. The integration of medical support, legal assistance, and business mentoring addresses the complex needs of women escaping abusive relationships. The Foundation's success attracts attention from policymakers interested in legislation that better protects pregnant women from domestic violence. Bethany frequently testifies before legislative committees about the connection between maternal stress and pregnancy complications. Emotional abuse during pregnancy creates measurable health risks for both mothers and babies, she explains to lawmakers. Supporting abuse victims isn't just compassionate, it's essential public health policy. Her advocacy contributes to stronger legal protections for pregnant women and expanded funding for domestic violence prevention programs. The personal becomes political as Bethany transforms her experience into systemic change. Meanwhile, Victor's supervised visits with Emma continue under strict court oversight. His progress in therapy remains inconsistent, with periods of apparent insight followed by relapses into self-pity and blame displacement. Your daughter deserves a father who prioritizes her welfare over his own comfort, the social worker explains during a difficult session where Emma cried throughout their interaction. Building that relationship requires genuine change, not performance for court evaluators. Victor struggles with the selflessness that healthy parenting demands. His narcissistic traits resist the vulnerability and unconditional love that children need from their parents. The contrast between his current circumstances and his former lifestyle creates ongoing resentment that undermines therapeutic progress. He focuses more on what he's lost than on the harm he caused or the changes he needs to make. 2 years after the courtroom devastation that ended his marriage, Victor works multiple minimum wage jobs to afford basic living expenses and child support payments. His former business associates have moved on to new ventures, leaving him isolated from the professional networks that once defined his identity. I had everything, he tells his court-appointed counselor. Successful business, beautiful wife, respect in the community. Now I'm nobody. You're a father with an opportunity to build a healthy relationship with your daughter, the counselor responds. But that requires focusing on her needs rather than your losses. The perspective shift challenges Victor's fundamental worldview. His narcissistic personality measures success through external validation and control over others, rather than through service and love. Back at Morrison Industries, Bethany's leadership continues generating impressive results. The company's focus on family welfare attracts top talent from competitors whose policies ignore employee needs outside work. We're receiving resumes from executives at major corporations who want to work for a company that values both professional achievement and personal well-being. Amanda reports during their weekly strategic planning meeting, the cultural transformation extends beyond policies to fundamental values. Bethany's approach proves that supporting employees' family needs enhances loyalty, creativity, and productivity rather than creating weakness or dependence. Her romantic life remains carefully managed, with therapy helping her recognize healthy relationship patterns versus manipulation tactics she learned to normalize during her marriage to Victor. I'm dating occasionally, but Emma and my work remain priorities. She explains to friends who encourage more active social life. Any partner worth having will understand that my daughter's welfare comes first. The boundary setting reflects hard-won wisdom about relationships based on mutual respect rather than control. Bethany's experience with narcissistic abuse taught her to recognize red flags and maintain independence, regardless of romantic involvement. As Emma approaches her second birthday, Bethany reflects on the journey from frightened abuse victim to confident leader building businesses that prioritize family welfare over profit maximization. The foundation now operates in 12 cities, providing comprehensive services to domestic abuse survivors and their children. The maternal wellness platform has been licensed to companies nationwide, creating industry standards for supporting pregnant employees and working mothers. We've helped over 1,500 women escape abusive relationships, Nathan Pierce reports during the Foundation's annual board meeting. Follow-up studies show significant improvements in both maternal and child welfare outcomes. The measurable impact validates Bethany's mission to transform personal trauma into systematic change that protects vulnerable families from domestic violence and control. Her story continues inspiring women facing similar challenges, demonstrating that survival is possible and that strength often emerges from surviving situations that initially seem impossible to overcome. Victor occasionally glimpses news coverage of Bethany's achievements, each article highlighting the success built from the ruins of their marriage. His own counseling progress remains uncertain, with court-ordered therapy addressing deeply ingrained personality patterns that resist meaningful change. The final chapter of their story remains unwritten, but the trajectory is clear. One partner chose accountability, growth, and service to others, while the other continues struggling with the consequences of prioritizing control over love, manipulation over support, and personal ambition over family welfare. Emma will grow up knowing her mother's courage created opportunities for thousands of women to escape dangerous relationships and build safe, healthy futures for themselves and their children. The legacy of strength and compassion will extend far beyond their family, touching lives that might otherwise have been lost to the particular cruelty of those who mistake control for love. In the end, justice was served not through revenge, but through transformation, turning the worst experience into the catalyst for the most meaningful work, proving that sometimes the greatest victory comes not from defeating an enemy, but from refusing to let their harm define your future. Bethany's final wisdom echoes in boardrooms and courtrooms, in therapy sessions and support groups, wherever women need reminding that their lives have value beyond what others might try to take from them. Your worth isn't determined by how someone treats you. Your strength isn't measured by what you've survived. Your future isn't limited by what you've lost. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you becomes the foundation for the most important thing you'll ever do. The story ends not with an ending, but with a beginning. Emma taking her first steps toward a future where love means protection rather than control, where success includes lifting others rather than stepping on them, and where the word family means safety, support, and unconditional love rather than fear, manipulation, and conditional acceptance based on convenience to others' ambitions.